as you'll see in this example, so here's the cover of the report that the student turned in, and this is what the student wrote. Okay, and what you'll see is there are 10 memos. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. Here's the third one, fourth one, fifth one, sixth one, seventh one, eighth, ninth, and 10th. Okay. Um, all right. So, and I'm not saying this is necessarily a good example. You can put in some attachments and things like that, some of the material that's with the case. But it's the idea that, okay, so what is this referring to? So here's the first report, okay? And this memo details what's in the first section of the 10 sections of the Jenkins case. So let me get rid of this and let's put up the Jenkins case. Okay. Now, unfortunately, the Jenkins case is called here the first practical problem. It has 10 parts. You are to do all 10 parts, but it got, because of limitations on how much content you can put in per thing, had to break it up into 3 separate groups. Okay, so you don't just turn in like the first 3 parts because that's the first practical. Oh, it's the first practical problem is all 10 of these parts. Okay, you know, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Okay, now that's the first problem. All right, so let's take a look at the first part of the 10 parts. Okay. All right, now I'm going to have to stop sharing and open that up again. 1 second. Okay. All right, let's do this. Okay.
You can just drag like from one screen to the other rather than having to stop the share and reshare.
Oh, really? Okay, let's
Yeah, like
try
you
that.
can drag like that tab from like the screen you're not sharing to the screen you're sharing.
Okay. Oh, well, first I got to open the thing up. Hang on a second. Oh, this is going to be a problem because this will open in Word, and I don't think I can share a separate Word document, can I? Well, maybe I can. Hang on.
Well, you can share your screen rather than the application, and then
Yeah.
like you can drag, like if let's say you have 2 screens, you can drag the Word doc from screen 1 to screen 2. You know what I mean?
Oh, wait a second here. Okay. Let's see. Let's see what this looks like. Here we go. This should do it. There it is. Okay. Here's part 1 of the 10 parts of the practical problem. Okay. And it says, you are Casey Barton. Please, in your memo, make sure your name goes on it, because there have been cases where 2 or 3 people turn in the entire project referring themselves as Casey Barton, and I don't know which student this was. Okay, so put your own name in there. But here you have Casey Barton, new auditor, internal audit department at Jenkins Manufacturing. And they've been in the business for more than 40 years, Central Texas, publicly traded. Jenkins family, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then get down to third paragraph. In order to become familiar with the audits that are conducted by your internal audit department, you've been reviewing working papers from previous audits. But then you note that 2 years ago, an audit was conducted of the purchasing function of a small division of the company in which the purchasing director, Thomas Brackens, was extremely uncooperative. Well, that might be fairly common occurrence in audits, and it kind of is. People don't like seeing the auditors come in and messing up their system. But he was extremely uncooperative, and the audit was never completed. Now, notation in the file that the CEO of the company asked the department to conduct another audit of an area that had been having serious problems as soon as possible. It required all resources to be pulled to complete the CEO's request. So it's nothing nefarious. It was just, hey, CEO says we got to move over to this other division. Okay, everyone, pull up stakes. We're going over there. Fine. But, where is this? The internal audit department had planned to finish the audit, but they never did. They never got around to going back. The auditors who worked on the purchasing audit have since left the company, as has the internal audit manager. Now, personally, if I work for a company where everyone's gone within 2 years, it makes me wonder how good a company that is. But nonetheless, they're all gone, which for the purpose of the problem, is good. Okay. So there's some notations that the auditors were having trouble locating some invoices and requisitions that had been selected for audit. And there were some purchases that looked like they had been split. Okay, a split purchase, you have authority to purchase up to $10,000. And so what you do is you take a $16,000 item and you split it into two separate $8,000 purchases. So you don't need to get, a higher up sign off on it. Okay. A previous audit of the area was conducted without major findings. In fact, there's a memo in the file from Jim Miller, the former director of purchasing, now retired, who thanked the internal audit for their assistance and that he would implement the recommendations immediately. But note, this was the previous audit of this area back when Jim Miller was the director of purchasing, but now the director of purchasing is Tom Brackens, the uncooperative one. You decide that it's time to look back into the situation. There are just too many red flags that say something's not right. You bring it up with your manager. He says, go ahead, check it out. But if it's going to take more than 100 hours, okay, so you're talking, 40-hour, hopefully you're only working 40 hours in a week. So you're talking about 2.5 weeks, right? You need to let her know. Cool. All right. Now, after each one of these sections, each one of these, parts, and there are 10 parts, are some questions. You are not to just answer the questions because, in real life, you don't find questions at the end of your assignments, right? But, however, the questions are useful in, determining what topics you're going to address in that memo you're going to write. Okay, so yes, you are going to answer the questions, but don't do like question 1, what red flags do you see? And then put in your answer. No, instead, write your memo, start it off with that sort of opening. You don't have to describe to your boss what Jenkins Manufacturing does because your boss has worked there for who knows how many years. But you can, I'd say, start that paragraph 3 and say, boss, as you know, I was reviewing some old audit files and came across this division where an audit was started 2 years ago, but then everyone got pulled off and never went back to complete it. However, from the file I'm looking at, there are some red flags. And then list what those red flags are. It kind of gives it to you right there. Okay. Next paragraph. Okay. What types of fraud could be occurring? Next paragraph. As you might know, these sort of red flags could indicate, A, B, C, D, whatever you come up with, that this type of, or even just A, that this type of fraud could be occurring. However, does not necessarily mean that it's occurring, but it's something we should look out for. There's your paragraph 2. Okay. Paragraph 3, address this question. But again, don't just write out the question and write out the answer. Say, and so, boss, I suggest, as you know, I've suggested that we go back out there and conclude the audit that was begun 2 years ago. Paragraph was up to 4. Mr. Brackens is the director of purchasing. The file indicates he's awful uncooperative. I will approach Mr. Brackens and describe what you think is an appropriate approach. Rough and tough, or try to keep it calm, keep it cool. All right. And then paragraph 5, here's my action plan. And describe, we will contact Brackens and tell them we're going to do this, and we'll be out there, blah, 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 blah. Okay, there's your action plan. And there's your first memo to your boss. Okay. Second memo will describe part 2. So you decide to conduct the audit, of the purchasing function for the division. Oh, and again, you put into this part 1 memo that, as you said, how would you check this out? We're going to go in, I propose we go back, and then put in that your boss said, yeah, go ahead and do it, but don't do more than 100 hours without telling me. Okay, cool. So part 2, boss. Before I go out to audit the purchasing function, I decided it might be good to get information about the division and employees, and then tell me what you found here. Now, there's actually a problem in the information here. Okay, so we got Brackens. Okay. He has 5 employees that work for him. Now, let's count these off. 1, the manager, 2 senior buyers, and 3 junior buyers. Guess what? That's 6 employees, not 5. Okay. And it gives, some information on each of them. Okay. And any purchase more than $10,000 must go out for a bid. All bids must be approved by the manager of the purchasing department or higher. The manager is Angela. Okay. Or higher is Brackens. Okay. And then only authorized vendors are allowed to bid. Vendors without a vendor number must be handled by special processing approved by the director, Brackens. And then junior buyers can go up to 5,000, senior buyers 7,000, managers and directors 9,000. That actually should be 10,000, right? Anyway, so you pull a listing of vendors who have been paid more than 100,000 for the last few years, and there we see here's. So these are so Jenkins Manufacturing Company, JMC. Here's the vendors who've made over 100,000. Been paid more than 100,000 the last few years, and we have a list of them, and we see the percentage of total purchases, and we see, looking at that, over time there's been a major shift. Okay, so question 1. So you tell your boss you've been looking at this information, and there's something a bit suspicious. And if you notice, these 2 companies at the bottom, TopQ and Blues Power, they had 0 in 2000. Again, this is going back a few years, obviously, 20-some years. If you want to add a 20 and make it 2020, 2021, 2022, that'd be fine. But so these 2 in 2020 had 0. But by 2022, okay, look at all the business they got. Look how much they were paid. Add that together, and you've got 43% of the business going to these 2 companies that didn't do anything. They got no business 2 years before. Okay. And they went from 0 in 1 year, from 0 to 40-some percent, and then 43%. So yeah, So don't just look at this here. I mean, that's still 35%, but these last 2 years, I mean, wow, that's something. So say this could be a little suspicious. Do you have predication for fraud? Okay, do you have enough? As I say, predication. Think of it, in the criminal law sense, it's like probable cause. Is there a probable cause here for fraud? And I'm going to give you this one. No. Is it suspicious? Yeah. Is it something you should look into? Yeah. Is it predication of fraud? Not really. Not at this point. Well, give me any number of reasons. Would you conduct a surprise audit of the area? I'll let you, the surprise audit is where you just show up and go, surprise, we're here, we're going to do the audit. You really want to tick people off, especially, both bad people and good people, do that. Do it if, and I think question 2 kind of prompts it. Since we don't have predication of fraud, it might not be wise to try a surprise audit. Okay. Do a surprise if you have a little more, you have some more basis to believe that fraud is occurring. How do you approach? I'll leave that up to you. And so again, this would be 5 paragraphs, maybe 6. So maybe start out with the first paragraph describing all this stuff about the department, and then second paragraph, the suspicious, stuff on the summary. Maybe you see something else suspicious. Toss it in there. Predication of fraud. Say, boss, I while this is suspicious, I don't believe this is a predication of fraud. Therefore, next paragraph. Therefore, I don't believe we should conduct a surprise audit, which would only, or would have a good chance of having people that we need their cooperation not cooperating with us. Instead, next paragraph. Instead, I say we and next paragraph. So what we'll do is do what we said in the last paragraph, and then go in and conduct the audit. By the way, I would suggest everybody read the whole thing first, because your answers here pretty much get addressed in the subsequent memo. Such as, you contact Brackens and inform him that you will be conducting the audit of his area and will begin tomorrow. That's pretty quick. You'll be conducting the audit of the area to close out the audit that was started a few years ago. You don't expect to be in the area more than a few days at most, but would appreciate his and his staff's full cooperation. Bracken informs you that he and his staff do not have the time for you to come in until, at a minimum, 3 months from now. Okay. Needless to say, after going back and forth between him and your boss, you make plans to conduct the audit starting tomorrow. You pull a listing of invoices paid to the highest paid vendors and the list. Okay, so you have just 2 questions here. Okay, so first paragraph of this third memo would be describing this back and forth with Brackens, because you want to get that documented. Okay. He said, we're going to come out, just finish off this audit from a couple of years ago. And he said, I need at least 3 months. For what? Okay. But, just mention it. And then, okay, review the detailed listing. Is anything suspicious on it? And what are your next steps? Okay, so here are a bunch of pages of purchases. Look it over. And anything you find suspicious, write it up. Okay. Is there one of the things you might want to look for again is splits, where an $18,000 purchase was split into 2 separate purchases on the same day or on the next day, something like that. Where okay, what are the? I'm trying to remember what the columns are. Okay, so we got the date. So look at the date, look at the vendor number, look at who the purchasing agent is, look at the invoice number. Okay, the amount. Okay, and the check number. Okay, do you have check numbers really close to each other? Do you have invoice numbers that are like right on top of each other that look a little weird? Kind of look it over, see what you can find, list a couple of them that just look a little suspicious. All right. And that's, what are your next steps? Well, your next step is kind of described in the next part, which unfortunately you have to go back to the content page and look at the next part. So again, I'm going to stop sharing, come back to you folks. In writing these memos, there we go. I'll put myself back up there. Hello. In writing the memos, again, look at the example, but the idea is don't just list the question and write out an answer. Instead, you want to format it as this narrative to your boss. Okay, this is what happened. This is what I learned. This is what we're going to do next. Okay, generally that's the pattern of those questions. Okay, this looks suspicious. Is it predication? I'll tell you that first question, no. Maybe later on there will be. And just, again, except for a couple of things like looking through those listing of invoices and coming up with, this looks kind of suspicious. Take a little time to do that. There's a couple of things in there that are kind of suspicious. And that's one of the few areas where we're really going to have to do some, shall I say, work. The rest of it is taking this situation that's presented to you and teaching you how to prepare a fraud examination report, which is this series of memos, contemporaneous to the time that you are out there. Okay. Anyway, okay. Is that I forget who it was that asked the question originally.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. You got it? Okay. So just write up these 10 memos based on each of those things. Now, you graduate students, lucky you, if we go back to the content, okay, you'll see that, okay, here's the first problem. Both undergrad and graduate students have to do this Jenkins manufacturing case. It's broken up into these 3 sections, again, just because at the time, putting it all together was overwhelming Blackboard. Okay. The grad students, you've got a second practical problem. This deals with an aircraft maintenance company. Same thing, though. Just write up, I think it's also 10 parts. So just write up these 10 different parts describing what's going on, what you found, what you're going to do next. Okay. And as I say, we've got an example posted there. We've got another thing about it was actually an example of supposedly based on a true fraud case report. And then when you're done with it, here are all the drop boxes. So if you're an undergrad, you drop your full report here in the undergrad drop box, the first one listed. And then undergrad, put your motion picture writing assignment into that second one. Graduate, you get more work. Okay, first practical problem, Jenkins, go in that first one. The aircraft maintenance company, practical problem, they put in the second drop box. And then you have 3 motion pictures to watch. Lucky you. Okay. And then I will be grading them based on this rubric. Okay. But and fear not, I'm pretty good. Write up some good, well-formed sentences and paragraphs. Makes me happy. Okay, folks. If you have questions on it as we go further this course, I would be happy to discuss it with you. You can, if you have specific things, shoot me an email. I'll get back to you on it.